On today's show, hundreds march in New York City demanding justice for the Florida teen who was shot and killed by a neighborhood watch volunteer. We'll talk about the public outcry over the case involving Trayvon Martin. You've probably seen lots of videos from the Occupy Oakland protests, but none as colorful as the one we'll show you. And find out who's been keeping a close eye on Occupy Wall Street supporters and potentially violating their First Amendment rights. I'm Jared Jakang Mayer. We bring you stories each week from the front lines of the Occupy Wall Street movement and give the microphone to you, the 99%. You're watching Occupy the Media. Thanks for tuning in to Occupy the Media. So this show is an effort by Free Speech TV to stay on top of the latest news coming out of the Occupy Wall Street movement. We want to cover the stories and perspectives you won't see on the corporate media, and we want to do this by giving the mic to you, the 99%. So join the conversation and call us toll-free at 877-575-FSTV. The lines are open. What are the important issues to you? Corporate greed, student loan debt, healthcare, or do you just have a question for the Occupy movement? All right, so let's get started with the latest headlines. Occupy Wall Street supporters took to the streets of New York last weekend to protest police brutality. Demonstrators say that during last week's spring celebration, police officers kicked, punched, and beat peaceful protesters. Activists are calling for the resignation of Police Commissioner Raymond Kelly, whom they say is encouraging these violent tactics. In Des Moines, Occupy activists joined a demonstration in front of the Iowa State Capitol. They were protesting an education reform bill that would move state funding away from public schools and into for-profit online schools. Activists say schools should build strong democracies, not a strong bottom line for private interests. The Securities and Exchange Commission is receiving pressure from a coalition of progressive organizations over corporate spending in elections. These groups want regulators to push publicly traded companies to be more open about the money they spend influencing who takes office. The U.S. Supreme Court's controversial Citizens United decision removed caps on election spending by the corporations and the wealthy. The U.S. Department of Justice has increased how long government spy agencies can hold on to information they've gathered on Americans, even if the individual has no known connection to terrorism. Previously, officials needed a clear link to terrorism to store information on U.S. citizens. Under the new policy, the government can now keep intelligence data for up to 5 years. And Occupy activists showed up at the United Nations building in New York. Their message: it's time to evict corporations that pollute the environment from the global political stage. Here's more.
Dressed up in the corporate costumes of their Wall Street counterparts, Occupy activists tried to turn the tables on the steps of the United Nations Saturday in New York. Occupiers called for the UN to evict corporate energy companies from global politics. Police weren't fooled by the suits and ties, though, and 4 protesters were arrested. The action marks the beginning of Occupy's month-long focus on the environment. The group says they want to connect the dots between dirty fossil fuel giants, the dirty legislation and subsidies those corporations receive, from the politicians they help elect with their profits. This is Caroline Briggs for Occupy the Media.
All right, that wraps up the latest headlines from the Occupy front, but let's take a minute to dig into the latest action from the Occupy movement. Sitting here in our studio today, Marcy Miranda, Free Speech TV's news producer, and Don Rojas, FSTV executive director. Occupy Wall Street has set up camp near the United Nations headquarters in New York as part of a month-long focus on the environment. Marcy, what's going on with this particular action, and what do we expect as far as how they're focusing on the United Nations?
Yeah, well, this is called, the group is called Disrupt Dirty Power, and they're really out to show us the links between this money and how it affects international policy when it comes to the environment. So they're really planning this whole month up until Earth Day, different actions throughout the city and on a national level to disrupt coal plants and power power plants, just to showcase essentially what's going on.
And so we've talked a lot here about the ways that corporations and the wealthy influence the American electoral system through donations or lobbying. But Don, on the international stage there at the UN, how does that actually work?
Right. Well, these transnational corporations influence international policy in a very negative way when it comes to the environmental issues. They are perhaps the largest polluters of the global environment, and they are the ones, the transnational companies, particularly the energy companies like Exxon and Chevron and Shell, they're the ones who are the most virulently opposed forces to any United Nations initiative, whether it be a treaty or a convention or a conference,
because the United Nations
that attempts to regulate global emissions standards.
And the United Nations has many agencies that focus on everything from political treaties to trade to world problems like hunger. But when we're talking about those big issues that these multinationals that you mentioned, which are stateless, they don't really have any they don't have any home base. They exist on the global sphere.
Exactly, and they own no sovereignty to any nation. That's why they're known as transnational corporations. Their power comes from the dirty politics and the dirty profits, the mega profits that they make in polluting the global environment.
And so speaking of disrupt dirty power, that's the name of this group that is having the latest action that we just talked about, but they're having several throughout the month. Marcy?
Yeah, and to learn more, if you go to their website, disruptdirtypower.org, they're encouraging people to gather in their own communities and find a way to disrupt dirty power, essentially.
Okay, next topic. Across the country, millions of Americans have been holding marches and demonstrations demanding justice for Trayvon Martin. In a few minutes, we'll give our viewers a chance to chime in. But first, Marcy, Trayvon Martin, a big story that has sparked outrage across the nation, as we talked about with marches and demonstrations. But where is it at now?
Well, the latest coming out of this is that the lead homicide investigator that was looking into the case actually said that he thought manslaughter charges should be pressed against George Zimmerman, who was the shooter here. But the Florida State's attorney looked at the case and said, nope, it clearly falls under this law that said that Zimmerman was standing his ground and had every right to shoot this unarmed teen.
And as this story unwinds and we learn even more about what happened and even how the police department there had bungled the investigation, essentially, Trayvon's case has gotten even more attention from the right-wing media. But now they're running a smear campaign against the teenager and making some outlandish accusations against other activists in the black community. Case in point, here's a clip from the O'Reilly Factor.
The Fox TV station in Orlando recently interviewed a man who says he witnessed the confrontation.
The guy on the bottom, who I believe had a red sweater on, was yelling to me, "Help, help." I told him to stop, and I was calling 911. And then when I got upstairs and looked down, the person that was on top beating up the other guy was the one laying in the grass, and I believe he was dead at that point.
Now, the Factor has not been able to confirm that Zimmerman was wearing a red sweater, but his lawyer is pounding the same theme. Right now, the situation is being inflamed by the Black Panther Party, which has arrived in Florida.
You killed mine, goddammit, I got to kill yours.
Black power.
By next week, we're looking forward to getting $1 million for the capture of George Zimmerman. We're going to force our government to do their job properly, and if they don't, we will.
And the lunatic Black Panther Party is out for blood. They don't care what really happened. And they are being prodded by powerful news organizations.
So Bill O'Reilly scolding other media organizations for propping up and giving attention to the new Black Panther Party. But Don, it's funny because the only place I ever hear about the new Black Panther Party is on Fox News.
I know, they're obsessed with it. And it's a splinter group, a very small, ineffectual organization within some of the African American communities. It doesn't have a huge national presence. It takes its name from the old Black Panther Party of the 70s and the 80s that was an effective force for social change back then. This new Black Panther Party is very marginal. So for the right-wing media to focus on them and to create a larger impression of what they are capable of is dishonest journalism.
And that's not the only thing that the right-wing media, at least, has been bringing up to try to tarnish Trayvon Martin's reputation there in ways that are just completely irrelevant to the case. But Marcy, let's focus back on the demonstrations and the outcry across the nation. What did we see recently with the Million Hoodie March, and what are we looking at for the coming weeks?
Yeah, I think one of the most interesting things about the Million Hoodie March was just the amount of attention that it's garnered, mostly on social media, which is actually very much in line with the way the Occupy movement itself has functioned, and how Twitter and Facebook have really pushed this to the forefront and to mainstream media's attention. I think one of the other really interesting things is how Occupy the Hood, which is a group that really sees these two intersect. These sorts of issues are things that Occupy the Hood in particular really cares about because they affect communities of color, and it's something that the Occupy movement is seeing connections with as well.
All right, let's give our viewers a chance to weigh in. Give us a call at 877-575-FSTV. Do you think Trayvon Martin's family will ever see justice? And this is our telephone mic check.
Mic check. Mic check.
Okay, so the lines are open, 1-877-575-FSTV. Give us a call. We're talking about the Trayvon Martin case and how at least the right-wing media has been reacting to it.
I also want to make the point that you don't see any so-called Tea Party members raising their voices against this latest example of racial injustice. All right, this was cold-blooded murder that took place in Florida, and it has aroused the anger and the indignation of millions of people all across the country, across racial and ethnic lines. A poll that came out yesterday, I think, shows that 75% of the American people believe that Zimmerman should be arrested and charged. So this has resonated powerfully because it is such an egregious act. It is so over the top that you cannot but respond with outrage.
Marcy?
I think one of the interesting things about this too is that this is one event in one community that has gotten a lot of national attention, but it's the sort of thing that for communities of color, this is certainly not anything new. This happens all over the place, and it's, like I said, one case in which a lot of people took notice, but it goes to show how how racism, how police brutality to a certain extent, how racial profiling is still very alive and well in minority communities, and it's just now that people outside of that are seeing it.
We do have a call. Roy from Tennessee, you're on Occupy the Media. Hello, Roy, are you there? Okay, it looks like we're having some trouble getting Roy from Tennessee on the line. But
well, talking about Tennessee, in some of the large cities in Tennessee, Memphis, for example, on Monday, like in dozens of cities across the country, there were demonstrations involving hundreds of people. There were multi-ethnic, multiracial demonstrations. Right here in Denver, we had one on Monday, demanding justice for Trayvon Martin. And so this has rippled across the country, and I'm very pleased to see that the Occupy movement in many parts of the U.S. have identified themselves with this.
Okay,
with this
Don,
issue.
I think we actually have Roy on the line. Roy, you there?
Yeah.
You're on Occupy the Media. You have a question or comment for us quickly?
Yeah, quickly. I feel that Mr. Rohan right there is underestimating that group, although I'm not for them at all.
You're referencing the new Black Panther Party?
Yeah, exactly. What I'm saying is they shouldn't be marginalized, because for them to come up with $1 million ransom in a week for the head, for the shooter to be found, I think is something to be reckoned with, because there's got to be something behind that splintered group that he's saying they are.
Well,
okay. Well, thanks for your call, Roy. Quickly, Don.
I'm not sure how credible that statement is. I don't have any intelligence that would suggest that the new Black Panther Party has the ability to raise that kind of money.
Unless they've started up a super PAC or some other way.
Kickstarter.
Kickstarter, there you go. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk to someone whose work is putting a more artistic spin on Occupy Oakland. But first, we want to hear from our social media viewers. Tell us what you think about the Trayvon Martin shooting. What would you do if that was your son? To join the conversation, post your comments online at Facebook and Twitter.
If somebody don't got no gun, how is it self-defense? It ain't bothering you. If somebody's coming at you doing something, yeah, but just to be walking and getting an argument and you kill a man, no. That's not right.
I would fight for my life if somebody would pull out a pistol on me.
Yeah, they ought to lock him up and put him in jail like they do everybody else.
And they went off based off his skin color and said they're not going to do anything about it. Now that right there is some racist stuff.
There's a lot of places, just being black will make somebody do something to you just for that reason. You know, I just don't agree with it.
Hello, I'm Antoinette June, and this is your Occupy Update. April 16th is the national occupation of Washington, D.C., Occupy Power. On April 16th, occupiers will greet Congress's return to D.C. with direct actions as they occupy power and show just how strong Occupy Power is. For more information, please visit nowdc.org.
You're watching Free Speech TV, a network powered by the people.
If you watched Fox so-called news this morning, you learned that President Obama is trying to buy votes with food stamps. What you didn't learn, though, was basic economics. Here was the Fox and Friends gang this morning mocking a new ad by the U.S. Department of Agriculture to raise awareness about food stamps for senior citizens and kids.
Is the government now pushing for senior citizens to take more handouts in the form of food stamps?
Well, as our nation faces a oh, you think this is funny, Stuart Varney? Our nation is facing $1 trillion deficit. Can we afford it? We ask you.
Of course you cannot afford it. Now,
Of course you cannot afford food stamps for the poor, but you sure can't afford tax cuts for the rich, right? By the way, did you notice the giant "Who's Ruining the Economy" graphic over there? What's better than watching a bunch of media millionaires yuck it up on a comfy couch and demonize the poorest of the poor in America, including children who haven't had enough food to eat each day unless the government steps in to help them? 47% of all food stamp recipients in America are under the age of 18.